All right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. We have a really interesting guest for you guys tonight. Theo Henderson is the creator and host of We the Unhoused podcast. He has actually a really interesting idea about what hotels can do during the coronavirus to really help. But of course, both the hotels and the government have chosen not to do that. We'll get to that in a second. But Theo, welcome to the show. You're in a unique situation because you do a podcast about the homeless or the unhoused, but you yourself are also unhoused. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was one of the genesis of why I felt it was important, because many people are talking about the unhoused crisis or houseless crisis or homeless crisis, but they rarely are asking unhoused people their opinion on the solutions that are part of their lives. So it's just like a dentist telling or making a root canal on the wrong tooth, and you keep telling them this tooth on my wisdom tooth needs to be extracted, and they are taking out your front teeth. So that's primarily the reason why I'm doing what I do.
Yeah, by the way, that literally happened to me. So I know the feeling. Okay, so Theo, for folks who aren't familiar, I think that they have this issue that the homeless feel like the others, and now there's this assumption, oh, they must have either a drug addiction problem or some mental health issues. In some of the cases, that's true, but actually in places like LA where you are, that's actually a minority of the unhoused. So as an example, Theo, how did you become unhoused?
That's excellently put. 60,000 unhoused people are not mentally ill and drug addict. And prior to this, and I always tell people this because I did not just one day decide, oh, this is going to be excellent living to live out on the street. I had a life. I'm a college educated man, and I was a teacher. And I was teaching around the Great Recession, and I became ill. I went into a diabetic coma. And I was a battle between me staying in my place and healing, because, as you know, insurance at the time, pre-Obamacare, was not always the most least inexpensive. So that ended up a downward spiral. I had lost my place. I started staying with friends, the kind-hearted friends, and then that became difficult because they were going through their own financial struggles. Then I would try to make my money stretched and go to those seedy hotels, and then that money ran out until I finally hit the streets. And this story is not an anomaly. My podcast highlights a lot of stories where people were living life. And for example, one of my guests became unhoused in the apartment that he used to be a landlord to after his wife died. So these stories are very commonplace. The exception is always the stories that the police and business improvement district employees push out, that unhoused people are criminals.
Yeah. So real quick, Theo, was it any of the medical bills that was an issue for you?
Medical bills, and not only that, to be clearer, it was medicine. I needed money to pay for my medicine, and before I was not on Medicare. I was a working person, and you don't qualify for Medicare if you're employed. At the time, I had to pay for the medicine or pay my rent, and of course, I'm going to survive. And what good is paying the rent if I drop dead? So I had to make some hard decisions.
This country's brutal, man. Now, as you say, you're college educated, et cetera. So you're savvy enough to be able to do a podcast under any circumstance, obviously. But it's got to be challenging when you don't have a house. So how in the world did you put together a podcast?
Well, it is a Herculean task, I can tell you. It is, and to be clear, people have always running around when they hear me say it, well, why don't you get a job? And I says, doing a podcast is like your show is a job. I found the solution in doing it by my phone. I interview people from my phone. I go to encampments. I go to wherever overpasses, way out in the thicket of places, and I interview unhoused people where they're at. And that's basically the long and short of it. I don't have the fanciest studio equipment, so you're going to hear noises or police sirens or the things like that. But I also want to educate the populace. That's what their lifestyle is. We are guests in their home. It's not the other way around. So,
yeah. Look, recommend your podcast. It's called We the On House, and I'll tell you why. When I briefly ran for Congress, it gave me an opportunity to spend a lot more time talking to homeless folks up in Lancaster, Palmdale, and other places, and almost everything you hear is a misconception. If you bother to talk to folks for a couple of minutes, or if you're still worried about that because of the things that you've heard, at least hear Theo talking to them. Okay. And you're going to be shocked to find out their stories. And at the end of the day, you know what you're going to think? Oh, they're just like me, but they ran into some trouble. Okay. Yes. And so that's especially in LA, that's the majority of cases.
And I also want to add to what people fail to realize. COVID-19 has released, the LA Times talks about 45% of people that are caught into the COVID-19 losing their jobs and living in these places, they will be joining the unhoused ranks soon because of the financial difficulties that's going to bring about after. Even though we are going back, releasing the shelter-in-place orders, people are still losing their jobs. People are going to be paying back rent that can't pay back rent, and people are still going to be trying to survive in this type of new normal, if that's such a word. So the unhoused crisis is going to be much more closer than they realize.
So that's right. So now, Theo, you have an interesting idea about the coronavirus situation. So what do you think the hotel should be doing right now?
The hotels right now should have been doing this a long time ago. We have two pandemics. We have COVID-19 and we have the war on the poor. And what the project hotel house key idea was, a coalition of housed and activists got together all over California to put the fire to the feet of the mayor and the governor to start commandeering more hotels. What we got was a lackluster response. The Los Angeles Times released another report saying most of those hotels that they were commandeering and making these deals with are empty. So this is reminiscent to the Olympics of 1984. 2028 is coming up, and the criminalization and punitive measures of the unhoused is still in sync. There is no compassion. There's no humanity. It's only political compassion.
Yeah. So look, I'm not at all surprised the hotels don't want to do it. And so do you think the government should force them to do it? And do they have the authority to do that at the state level?
Yes, they do. And yes, they should. It is amazing to me, and I don't know if you're familiar with some of the ordinances and laws on the books. Look at the speed that it takes for them to penalize and criminalize unhoused. And look at the reluctance for them to exact the same speed when it comes to pushing our citizens to care about people that are in vulnerable and impoverished conditions. They drag their feet. They're begging them to have a heart. Or they're just basically tone deaf, or they're using terms like political compassion, or these ridiculous things where it should have been like, okay, we've given you billions of dollars of tax money. It is time for you to step up and become much more concerned about your fellow man instead about your spreadsheet. Because you could always rebuild a building. You could always renovate a house or room. But we cannot do is always save a life if someone is in great need from health issues, or you don't have to have health issues. Housing is a human right, and it should be in this country.
Good luck to you, brother. Literally, right? I think it's amazing that you're doing that program, and I think that you're going to need a lot of luck to convince politicians who take money from big money interests like probably hotels. But what you're saying is logical. There's no question that the hotels have rooms now. There's no question at all. And I've read the stories about in Nevada, Las Vegas particularly, people living out in the desert in the most, in the hardest situations you can imagine, especially some that are getting sick because of coronavirus. Meanwhile, you got thousands upon thousands of available hotel rooms sitting completely empty. So, man, unfortunately, it is some sign of the capitalist, country that we live in, and it's not a pretty picture. And certainly the runaway, outrageous form of capitalism that we're doing this day and age in America. All right, and so Theo, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Everybody check out We the Unhoused. And if you like what Theo's saying about the movement on hotels, please join. Okay?
Yes. And No Vacancies is the movement that we are part of.
Theo, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.